right, let's officially get started. All right, we have one more form. I think this is our last one, which is our seller's intent to exchange. So this is if we have a seller that is selling a property that is an investment property, and they intend to complete a 1031 exchange with a purchase forward. Even if it's not going to hold up the sale of the property, it's good to have this form so that the seller has document that this was their intent, that their intent was to exchange this property. It just helps with the paperwork, making sure they have this in place. The following terms and conditions are hereby incorporated or made part of the purchase agreement. And then you're going to put the date there. You can check the other box and fill in that form. Fill in the full address, buyer's names, seller's names. If I'm filling this out before we have a buyer for the property, I'm just leaving this buyer name blank, just so you know. So oftentimes all these are filled out prior to obtaining a buyer for the property. So I'm just going to leave it blank and let the buyer's agent fill that in for themselves when they go to sign these disclosures. Seller's intent to exchange. It is the intent to utilize this transaction as part of an exchange of like-kind property, which would be other property, under the Internal Revenue Code 1031, which is why it's called a 1031 exchange, and the regulations promulgated, that was wrong, they're under other property. The other property to exchange is described as blank. So if we've already identified the property, it goes there. Or it's to be located and designated by the seller, who shall take all steps necessary to enter into a contract to acquire such other property. Okay? So it's either we're identifying the property address, or we're saying that, hey, it's to be located and designated. Cooperation. Buyer agrees to cooperate in effecting seller's exchange as specified below. Buyer in this transaction shall not be required to take title of other property for any period of time as an accommodation to seller unless agreed to in writing. Buyer agrees at no cost to buyer to take such actions and execute or consent to such additional documents and transactions as may be reasonably requested by the seller, provided that all other conditions of the, okay, at no cost to buyer. Failure of exchange. Okay, this section's important. We need to fill this out. If seller is unable, through no fault of seller, to locate, designate, or enter into contract to acquire or complete acquisition of such other property by close of escrow in the agreement, or as extended by mutual, shall close without extension of time for closing. 95% of the time, that's how we do exchanges. We just are saying, hey, the seller's doing a 1031 exchange, sign this form acknowledging that. We're not going to delay the close of escrow. We're not going to cause any problems with it. We just need this form as part of the transaction. Okay, but the other options are, so A is transaction close without extension. The close of escrow for this transaction ended for a maximum of blank days to enable seller to complete such arrangements. So we might say, hey, we might end up with a default of this of, hey, extended by a maximum of 30 days. That way, if the seller needs more time, because once we close escrow on the property they're selling, the sellers have a very tight time frame in which to get into contract on the property or to identify and designate a property that they're going to purchase as the exchange property. So the seller may want more time to do that. Okay, C option is this transaction shall be canceled. Buyer's deposit shall be returned to buyer, and all other parties shall be released from any other further obligation to each other. Right? So this gives the seller the option to cancel the transaction if they can't find a property to exchange. Or D is other, and you can fill in the blank with the seller's desires. So those are your options under section 4, failure to exchange. Default is it's going to close without an extension of time. B is you can extend the close of escrow. C is you can cancel, or D is other. Indemnity. The seller shall indemnify, defend, and hold harmless other people, the other party to this transaction, agents, from all liabilities and any additional attorney fees, accountant fees, or other costs arising from or connected in any way with the exchange. It's not the buyer's or the agent's responsibility. 6 is additional terms. Okay, you can fill that in there. And then 7 is tax and legal consequences of an exchange. Locating, designating properties pursuant to this addendum, if applicable, are the responsibility of the party requesting the exchange. That would be the exchangor. In this case, it would be the seller. There's also one of these forms for a buyer, just so you know, and will not occur automatically as a result If the exchange will be non-simultaneous under federal law, the property to be acquired by the exchanger must be identified within 45 days after transfer of exchanger's current property. The acquisition generally must be completed within 180 days after transfer of exchanger's current property, and the 180-day period may be shorter under some circumstances. The manner and of structure of an exchange transaction will have significant tax and legal consequences. Parties should consult a qualified California real estate attorney or their tax advisors or both regarding this important matter. For the most part, most of our people completing 1031 exchanges are going to use a 1031 exchange company, which helps to facilitate it under all the tax laws and inside the tax code to make sure that they stay out of trouble. They also hold all the funds there for the purchase forward or for a buyer to complete their purchase. Scope of broker duty. The parties agree that no real estate broker or agent has given either party tax or legal advice regarding whether the party or other party qualified for an exchange. The parties are advised to seek the advice of a qualified California real estate attorney or certified public accountant regarding the ability and legal requirements to complete the exchange. By signing below, seller and buyer acknowledge that each has received a copy of this seller intent to exchange addendum, and each has read, understands, and agrees to its terms. Any questions about this seller's intent to exchange? All right, fabulous. That brings us to the end of our forms for today. I hope that was useful. I hope you feel a little bit more comfortable using some of these forms that we don't see on a regular basis and using some of the forms that we should be seeing more regularly that we're not seeing on a regular basis to make those part of your regular practice. If you guys have any questions, holler at me again next week. We'll be here at 9 o'clock. We have our staying out of court with Robert Brand. He's fabulous. Join us for that one. It'll be on Zoom. And hold on, I've got something in the chat box. Oh, if you want to suggest a training, we're getting ready to put together our fall training schedule. There's a link in the chat box you can click on to make recommendations of trainings that you would like to see. Watch for a survey to come out in the Facebook group. It may also come out via text as well, asking for what days and times you prefer for trainings, so that as we put together the new schedule, we try to accommodate as many people as possible. Thanks everyone for joining me today, and have a fabulous day. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.